Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The sandstorm howled across the cracked plains of Xerxes 9, a dying planet where the last human outpost clung to survival. Jace Varro wiped grease from his forehead, squinting at the failing reactor core in front of him. The Exarchal Empire had cut supply lines months ago, and if this repair failed, the outpost's shields would collapse. A sudden impact tremor rocked the ground. Jace stumbled, grabbing a wrench to steady himself. The sensors hadn't warned of an attack. So what the hell was that? Outside, the storm raged, but something dark and massive had crashed near the perimeter. Jace grabbed his rifle and signaled the others. "We've got a breach. Unknown object, 300 meters west." The wind nearly knocked him over as he trudged toward the impact site. Through the swirling dust, he saw a smoldering wreck. Not a ship, but something organic. A figure lay motionless, half buried in the sand. Jace's breath caught. It was a Voidborn. Tall, with obsidian-like skin that shimmered under the storm's lightning, the alien was female, her body armored in segmented plates. A jagged wound glowed faintly on her side. Those Arxol plasma fire. "Damn it," Jace muttered. Voidborn were predators, the Xarxol's elite hunters. If she woke up, she'd slaughter them all. But then her eyes snapped open, violet, piercing, filled with pain. Her hand shot out, gripping Jace's wrist with terrifying strength. "Human," she rasped. "Run." Before he could react, a roar split the storm. Something far worse was coming. The roar echoed again, closer this time. A deep guttural sound that made the sand tremble under Jace's boots. Kayla's grip tightened on his wrist. "They followed me," she hissed, her voice strained. "Xarxol trackers. If they find me here, they'll burn your outpost to dust." Jace's mind raced. The Voidborn were legendary hunters, but the Exarchal, they were exterminators. If they were coming, his people had minutes, maybe seconds. He made a decision. "Can you walk?" he demanded, slinging her arm over his shoulder. Kayla snarled in pain but forced herself up. Barely. They stumbled toward the outpost, the storm howling around them. Behind them, the ground shuddered. Something massive was moving in the dust. The outpost under siege. The moment they crossed the perimeter, alarms blared. "Jace, what the hell is that?" Rin, the outpost's medic, stood frozen, staring at Callus. "No time." Jace shoved past, dragging Callus toward the medbay. "Xarxol are coming. Lock down everything." The outpost erupted into chaos. Engineers scrambled to reinforce the shields, while the few armed defenders took positions along the walls. Callus collapsed onto a med table, her wound glowing brighter. A bad sign. Rin hesitated, then grabbed a cauterizer. "This'll hurt." Callus bared her teeth. "Do it." The smell of burning flesh filled the room as Rin sealed the wound. Callus didn't scream, but her claws dug into the table, leaving deep grooves. Jace leaned in. "Why are the Exarchal after you?" Callus' violet eyes locked onto his. "Because I stole this." She tapped a hidden compartment in her armor. A holographic disc slid out, pulsing with eerie blue light. "They're superweapon schematics. If they deploy it, your species dies with mine." First blood. A deafening explosion rocked the outpost. The lights flickered. "Shields at 40%. Someone shouted over the comms. Jace sprinted to the monitor. Outside, 3 Exarchal war beasts circled. Massive, 6-legged horrors with plasma cannons fused into their exoskeletons. Behind them, a squad of armored Xarxal soldiers advanced. "We can't hold them off," Rin yelled. Callus forced herself up, swaying but steady. "You won't have to." She grabbed Jace's rifle, inspecting it with disdain. "Primitive, but it'll do." Before he could stop her, she leaped onto the roof, her movements still fluid despite her injury. Jace followed, his heart pounding. Callus took aim. One shot. A Xarxal soldier dropped, his helmet shattered. The others screeched, turning toward her. Kalis grinned, all fangs. Now they see me. The trap. The exarchal charge, their war beasts firing wildly. Kalis moved like a shadow, dodging plasma blasts, picking them off one by one. But she was still wounded. A blast caught her shoulder, spinning her around. She hit the ground hard. Jace didn't think. He ran, dragging her behind cover as return fire scorched the air above them. "Why did you do that?" Kalis snarled. "Because we need you alive." Jace snapped back. She stared at him, something unreadable in her gaze. Then, a new sound cut through the battle. Engines. A ship, not Sarxel, descended through the storm. Kalis' eyes widened. "No, they found me." Jace looked up. The ship's markings were clear. Voidborn. And they weren't here to help. The Voidborn ship hovered ominously, its sleek black hull cutting through the storm like a blade. Jace's grip tightened on his rifle as the landing ramp descended, revealing 3 armored figures. Voidborn soldiers, their violet eyes glowing in the dim light. Kalis hissed under her breath. "Don't move." The lead Voidborn stepped forward, his voice a deep, resonant growl. "Kalis, you are charged with treason against the Voidborn ascendancy. Surrender the disk, or we burn this outpost to the ground." Jace's blood ran cold. "You brought them here," he whispered to Kalis. She didn't answer. Her claws flexed, her body coiled like a spring. "Last chance, traitor," the Voidborn commander snarled. Kalis' response was instant. She lunged. A fight on 2 fronts. The Voidborn moved faster than Jace could track. Kalis met them head-on, her claws slashing through armor as she dodged plasma fire. But she was still wounded, and the soldiers outnumbered her. Jace didn't hesitate. He fired, catching one Voidborn in the shoulder. The alien roared, turning on him, just as Kalis rammed her claws through its chest. The remaining 2 Voidborn hesitated. "You side with humans." One spat. Kalis wiped black blood from her claws. "I side with survival." A new explosion rocked the outpost. The Exarchal were advancing again. Jace grabbed Kalis' arm. "We can't fight both." She bared her fangs. "Then we run." The truth about the weapon. They barricaded themselves in the outpost's armory. Kalis activated the stolen disk, its holographic display revealing a massive orbital weapon. The Exarchal Annihilator. "It doesn't just destroy planets," Kalis said, her voice grim. "It consumes their cores, turning them into fuel for their war machine. My people helped build it, until we realized they planned to use it on us next." Jace stared at the schematics. "Why steal it alone?" Her gaze flickered. "Because my own kind would have used it the same way." A heavy silence fell. Then, a voice crackled over the comms. "Jace, we've got a bigger problem." Rin shouted. "The Exarchal just called for reinforcements. A warship's entering orbit." Kalis' eyes met Jace's. "Then we take the fight to them," she said. A desperate plan. The Voidborn ship was still outside, lightly guarded. Kalis' lips curled into a vicious smile. "You ever flown a Voidborn vessel, human?" Jace exhaled. First time for everything. They fought their way to the ship, cutting down the remaining Voidborn guards. Inside, the controls were alien, but Kalis' hands flew over them with practiced ease. The engines roared to life. As they lifted off, the Exarchal warship loomed above them, a monstrous, spiked leviathan. Kalis' fingers tightened on the controls. "Ready to die, Jace Farrow." He grinned. "Hell no. But I'm ready to fight." The ship surged forward, straight toward the warship's hangar. The stolen Voidborn ship screamed through the Exarchal warship's defensive fire, alarms blaring as plasma bolts scorched past the hull. Jace clenched his teeth, gripping the co-pilot's seat as Kalis wrenched the controls, sending them into a spiraling dive. "They're locking torpedoes," he shouted over the roar of the engines. Kalis didn't flinch. "Then we don't let them fire." She slammed the thrusters forward, and the ship plowed straight into the warship's hangar bay, shearing through metal doors in a shower of sparks. The impact threw them both forward, restraints biting into their shoulders. For a second, there was only silence. Then, the hiss of depressurization. They were in. A prisoner in the dark. The hangar was eerily empty, save for a few scattered Xarxal drones, mechanical horrors with too many limbs, now sparking and twitching from the crash. Jace grabbed a fallen pulse rifle, checking the charge. Where's the crew? Callous nostrils flared. Close. They moved through the warship's corridors, the walls lined with organic-looking circuitry, pulsing like veins. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of ozone and decay. Then, Jace heard it. A voice. Human. Don't know anything, I swear. Jace and Callus exchanged a glance before creeping forward. Through a reinforced viewport, they saw a human prisoner strapped to an interrogation slab. A woman in tattered Colonial Defense Force fatigues, her face bruised but defiant. A Xarxal interrogator loomed over her, its insectoid mandibles clicking. You will tell us where the other outposts are. Jace's blood boiled. We're getting her out. Callus grabbed his arm. That's not the mission. It is now. Callus' secret. They struck fast. Jace blew the door controls while Callus tore through the guards, her claws rending armor like paper. The prisoner, Lieutenant Mara Vex, stared in shock as Jace freed her. You're human, she rasped. Unfortunately, Callus muttered, scanning the hallway. Mara's eyes locked onto the Voidborn. You're with her. Jace ignored the venom in her tone. She's the reason we're alive. Now move. But as they retreated, Callus suddenly froze. A holographic alert flashed on her stolen disk. A signal. They're activating the weapon, she whispered. Mara's face paled. What weapon? Jace didn't get a chance to answer. A new voice echoed through the corridor, smooth, chilling, and unmistakably Voidborn. Callus, did you really think you could hide from me? A figure stepped from the shadows. Taller than Callus, his armor adorned with jagged honors. His violet eyes burned with cold fury. Dane. Callus' voice was barely audible. The Voidborn commander smiled. Hello, sister. Betrayal. Jace's pulse spiked. Sister. Callus didn't look at him. Dane leads the Ascendancy's war fleet. He made a deal with the Xarxal. Dane chuckled. A temporary alliance. Once we reclaim the disk, we'll turn their weapon against them. He stepped closer. Join me. Together, we'll burn their empire to ash. For a heartbeat, Callus hesitated. Then, she attacked. Dane moved faster, catching her wrist and slamming her into the wall. Sentimental to the end. He raised a blade. Jace fired, the pulse round scorching Dane's shoulder. The Voidborn snarled, turning. Just as Mara stabbed a stolen Xarxal blade into his side, Dane roared, backhanding her across the room. Callus seized the opening, driving her claws into his chest. Black blood splattered the floor. Dane gasped, collapsing. You, fool, the Xarxal, already launched. The ship shuddered violently. An alarm wailed. The annihilator was firing. Callus grabbed Jace. We have to go. Now. The choice. They sprinted for the hangar, Mara limping behind them. The warship was coming apart, sections exploding as the annihilator's energy wave ripped through nearby planets, consuming them in flashes of light. Jace's mind raced. We can't outrun that. Callus skidded to a stop at their stolen ship. We don't have to. She input a command into the disk. I can override the weapon, but I have to do it from inside the control core. Jace understood instantly. That's suicide. She met his gaze. It's the only way. Mara grabbed Jace's arm. We have to leave. The ship trembled as the annihilator's next target locked on. Xerxes 9. Callus shoved Jace toward the ship. Go. For the first time, Jace saw something in her eyes. Not fury, not duty. Regret. Then she was gone, sprinting deeper into the dying warship. The stolen Voidborn ship rocketed away from the dying Sarxel warship, its hull groaning under the strain of the Annihilator's energy wave. Jace gripped the controls, his knuckles white, his eyes locked on the rear display, where Kellis had vanished into the storm of fire and metal. Mara collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, clutching her injured ribs. We need to jump to hyperspace now, before that weapon hits Xerxes 9. Jace didn't answer. His fingers hovered over the thrusters. Then he swerved the ship hard, banking back toward the warship. "What are you doing?" Mara screamed. "Something stupid," Jace growled. The core. The warship's central chamber was a nightmare of pulsing energy conduits and crackling plasma, the air thick with the stench of burning metal. Kalis sprinted through the chaos, dodging falling debris as she neared the Annihilator's control core, a massive, glowing sphere suspended in the heart of the ship. She jammed the disk into the access terminal. The holographic schematics flared to life, revealing the weapon's firing sequence. 5 minutes until detonation. Her claws flew over the controls, inputting the override codes. If she could reroute the energy surge, she could turn the Annihilator's power against itself. A plasma blast seared past her head. She whirled. Dane stood in the doorway, his chest still bleeding from her earlier strike, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You always were a traitor," he spat. Kellis bared her fangs. "And you were always a fool." They collided in a whirlwind of claws and fury. No retreat. Jace's ship slammed into the warship's hangar for the second time that day, the impact nearly tearing the hull apart. Mara cursed as she grabbed a rifle. "You're going to get us killed." Jace was already running. "Then make it count." They fought through collapsing corridors, dodging Sarxel soldiers and falling wreckage. The warship was coming apart around them, the Annihilator's energy building to a catastrophic peak. Then, a roar of pain echoed ahead. Jace rounded the corner just in time to see Kellis drive her claws through Dane's chest, black blood spraying across the control panels. Dane gasped, choking. "You can't stop it." Then he collapsed. Kellis turned and froze when she saw Jace. "You idiot," she snarled. "I told you to go." Jace grinned. "Since when do I listen?" The final gambit. The terminal flashed a critical warning. 90 seconds to detonation. Kellis spun back to the controls. "The override isn't working. The core needs a manual destabilization, a physical trigger." Jace understood instantly. Someone has to stay behind. Mara grabbed his arm. "Jace." He didn't hesitate. "Get to the ship. Now." Kellis' eyes widened. "No. I stay. This is my fight." Jace shook his head. "You're the only one who knows how to fly that Voidborn junkie. They need you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Kellis snarled and punched Jace square in the jaw, knocking him back. "Wrong," she hissed. "You're the only one who can save them." Before he could react, she shoved him toward Mara, then slammed her fist into the terminal, locking them out. The doors sealed shut. The end and the beginning. Jace roared, pounding on the door, but it was no use. Mara dragged him back as the warship shuddered violently, the Annihilator's core overloading. They barely made it to the ship before the explosion tore through the warship, a shockwave of blue fire consuming the Annihilator, and the Xarxol fleet with it. Jace stared at the blaze through the viewport, his breath ragged. Kellis was gone. Epilogue. The Legacy. 1 month later. The survivors of Xerxes 9 had regrouped, salvaging what remained of the outpost. The Xarxel Empire, crippled by the loss of their superweapon, had retreated. Jace stood at the edge of the desert, watching the twin suns set. A shadow fell beside him. "You look like hell," Mara said. He smirked. "Feel like it too." She handed him a small holodis, the one Callus had stolen. We decoded the rest of the data. There's coordinates, other human colonies, survivors. Jace took it, turning it over in his hands. Then he looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to shine. Then let's go find them. Somewhere, in the void between stars, he liked to think Callus was laughing.